You know, I've been watching this thing with the American embassy moving to Jerusalem. I guess we're all watching it on TV. And it reminded me of something about failure. Failure is a habit. It's a habit of mind. I have seen this all throughout my life. I've seen it with dozens of people. Sometimes it's even popped up in my own life, that failure is something you get used to and you keep doing the same thing. You know the old expression that insanity is when you keep doing the same thing, but you expect different results. I had a friend, a little off the topic, but actually a good story. I had a friend a long, long time ago, and we would go out together, and sometimes we double date, sometimes. And he dated a different woman all the time who was always the same woman. She always looked the same. She always had short-cut blonde hair. She was always small frame, but very beautiful. And she was always out of her mind. I seriously never went out with this guy when his girlfriend did not end up curled up on the floor screaming and crying about something. And it was always a different woman. It was always, and they were so similar. They even looked so similar that one night we went out together, and it was halfway through the evening before I realized he had changed girlfriends again, because they were always. And one night he and I sat up in one of those kind of guys drinking all night, things, and we were talking about life and everything. And he said, "I can't understand it. I cannot understand it. My relationships keep falling apart." And I was like, you keep going out with the same woman. What are you talking about? I've gone out with all these. No, I said, yeah, but they even look exactly alike. And he couldn't hear me. It reminded me, have you ever seen, Rob, that thing about the nail? It's not about the nail. Oh, let's play just a little bit of it. This is a girl sitting on a sofa explaining to her boyfriend that she's got this terrible headache. And if you can't see it, if you're just listening, when she turns around, we see there's a gigantic nail sticking out of her forehead.
It's just, there's all this pressure, And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
I love that, because that is the habit of failure. That is the habit of suffering. And in the Bible, St. Paul says, "I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do." I think it even goes beyond that too. That is, of course, the state of sin, but it also goes beyond that to what the philosopher Schopenhauer said. He said, a man can do what he wants, but he can't will what he wants. I think we even want the things that destroy us. And what we have to examine is we have to examine the underlying principles that we're operating on, the broken principles that are causing us to become comfortable with this habit of failure. So you want to see a habit of failure, you want to see a country that got into a habit of failure, take a look at this montage of the presidents and see if you can spot which president is different from the others. This is cut number 3.
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city accessible to all.
As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city of Israel as chosen as its capital.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again.
And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
Can you spot the difference between those presidents? It's like, I think it's 23 years ago, there was a bipartisan law passed in Congress that said Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and we will move our embassy to Jerusalem because it is the capital of Israel where we put our embassies, right? 23 years ago. In this law, there is a waiver that every 6 months, if you say, well, maybe this is not the right time, you can sign that waiver. For 23 23 years, presidents have been signing that waiver and obviously not doing, it's not like they've been scratching their chin and walking around the Rose Garden and thinking, do I say, the thing, it's the waiver time again. Yeah, let's do, and it's just the habit of failure where if we believe in it, if it's a bipartisan law, why ain't we doing it? For 23 years, I can understand 6 months. I could understand a year putting it off. But for 23 years, you get into a habit of failure. And that habit of failure, underneath that habit of failure, is a system of thought, is a system of values and principles that are powering that you can't let go of, even as they're causing you to sink beneath the waves. And we do this in all kinds of things. We do it in our personal lives. We do it in our professional lives. And we've been doing it in our national lives with Jerusalem. I'm going to show you what that underlying principle is, or at least some of those underlying principles that have caused us to fail on this again and again, every president promising it and every president letting it go by the board. But all right, so what is the underlying principle that fuels this habit of failure to support Israel? I will show it to you in what was an amazing press conference with Raj Shah, the assistant, spokesman for the White House. And here are the questions that the reporters were asking him about. Now, to set this up, obviously, you probably already know this, that Hamas in Gaza has basically told people to try and invade Israel. And as apparently they told the people that the wall between Gaza and Israel was not manned, which it is. It's manned with soldiers who protect it. And so they raced at the wall, setting tires on fire, throwing gas things, over this, throwing flaming kites and all this. And the Israelis opened fire on some of them as they were charging the wall. It was an invasion. It was thousands of people charging the wall. So they opened fire and more people have been killed. More Palestinians have been killed than since the 2014 war. So here is the press reacting to this in the way they've been reacting for 70 years, right? Israel is now 70 years old, and this is the way the press has been reacting forever, asking these questions of Raj Shah.
The death toll is over 50 in Gaza. Is the U.S. calling on Israel to use restraint in dealing with these protests?
Well, we believe that Hamas is responsible for these tragic deaths, that their rather cynical exploitation of the situation is what's leading to these deaths, and we want them to stop.
So there's no burden on Israel to do something to sort of rein it in?
If I can very quickly, the French Foreign Minister Raj said about what's taking place in Gaza, he urged Israeli authorities to exercise discretion and restraint. So to be clear, does the U.S. not agree with the French that Israeli authorities should exercise discretion and restraint?
We believe that Hamas is responsible for what's going on.
So there's no responsibility beyond that on the Israeli authorities. Kill at will.
What I'm saying is that we believe that Hamas, as an organization, is engaged in cynical action that's leading to these deaths.
On the issue of peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, when was the last time the White House reached out to Palestinian leadership? And will, given the high numbers of casualties, Palestinians calling what's happened today a massacre, will the White House be reaching out?
Well, I don't honestly have an answer for you on that. I'll get back to you.
Just follow up then.
Sure.
I mean, Jared Kushner in his speech pointed a finger at the Palestinians, saying they were responsible for provoking violence. But given the fact that it's only Palestinians that are being killed, should Israel not shoulder some of the blame?
Well, as I said earlier, we believe Hamas bears the responsibility. Look, this is a propaganda attempt. I mean, this is a gruesome and unfortunate propaganda attempt. I think the Israeli government has spent weeks trying to handle this without violence.
How many times does he have to say the same thing over and over again? It's Hamas who's responsible for this. Hamas is a terrorist organization. In its charter, it calls for the destruction of Israel. When Hamas's leader was asked, does he believe that Israel has a right to exist? He said, I'll have to have a country first and then I'll get back to you. Thanks a lot. That's like, do you believe that I have a right to exist? Well, I need a gun first and then I'll let you know. The Daily News, just to cover itself in slime, and when you have underlying principles that are wrong, when you underlying principles that are misguided, one of the ways you can tell is what turn into. That's one of the ways you can tell. If you can't argue with someone who opposes you without using four-letter words, if you can't argue without attacking somebody personally, you probably made a mistake somewhere. Here's the Daily News. Ivanka Trump was sent over to the opening of the embassy, made speeches welcoming people. It was a celebratory event. in Israel because obviously, finally, they're getting something that has just been reality. America is just recognizing reality. The Daily News puts out this headline of Ivanka smiling, "Daddy's little ghoul." 55 slaughtered in Gaza, but Ivanka all smiles at Jerusalem embassy unveil. When you turn into that, when you turn into a person who does that to someone, you know that you've made a mistake. That's when you start to say, like, oh, yeah, now I stink. I suck. And it's probably because my values are bad. Morning Joe re-echoed this, just like kind of slavishly sold this line of thought. Listen to them talking about this.
And Mika, for the rest of the world, you actually saw an administration, a White House, and we'll say it since Ivanka Trump was there, a family completely out of touch with the realities of the region that they're dealing with. And, you know, you had 55 people killed yesterday? 58. And you had a split screen of what looked like a VIP tent at the Belmont Stakes. And they don't care. Seemed totally oblivious to what was going on, not so far away.
Totally oblivious. They're celebrating it. They're celebrating the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem while these terrorists who want to wipe this country off the face of the earth are trying to kill them. You know, Nikki Haley pushed this a little further, saying it's not just Hamas, that Hamas is Iran. And that, of course, is true. The Iran deal, part of what's going on is Iran is fighting back against Washington that is finally admitting that Iran is not our friend. Iran is responsible for a lot of this. And Nikki Haley in the UN, when they were gathering together to condemn Israel, went after them.
In recent days, Hamas terrorists, backed by Iran, have incited attacks against Israeli security forces and infrastructure. That is violence that should occupy our attention too. The common thread in all of this is the destabilizing conduct of the Iranian regime, a regime that insists on promoting violence throughout the Middle East while depriving its own people of basic human rights. The United States welcomes a discussion of this violence in the Middle East. We welcome discussing the ways we can cooperate with each other to put an end to this violence. There is far too little discussion in the Security Council on Iran's destabilizing presence in Syria, its promotion of violence in Yemen, its support for terrorism in Gaza, and its dangerous and illegal weapons buildup in Lebanon.
So, you know, this is what's happening here. Walter Russell Mead, great new columnist of the Wall Street Journal, wrote about this today. What is happening is Obama was basically withdrawing from the Middle East, and he thought if we're nice to Iran, Iran will become more moderate, and they'll be nice, and we can just kind of pull out, and then we'll have the great global world that's coming, the great, unified global world run by the UN. And America won't have to be the cop anymore on the street. So it's just, we'll just kind of decline into like a sort of England. We used to be a great power, but we're not anymore. And Donald Trump is like, I don't think so. I don't think that's where this is going. Obviously, Iran is not moderating, is not becoming a more moderate force. Whether they're building nuclear weapons or not, they're not becoming a moderate force. They're still terrorists trying to destroy Israel. If we pull out, Israel is going to be in big trouble. And freedom is going to be in big trouble, because that is the underlying principle that these reporters are all missing. The idea is that we are supposed to be fair and treat Palestine, the Palestinians and the Israelis the same. And we should not. We should not. They are not the same. You know who knew this? Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, he never acts on it. He never did anything about it. He brags about how he helped pass the bill declaring Jerusalem the capital, but he never did anything. He supported Obama. He didn't support the Iran deal, but he supported Obama when Obama was stabbing Israel in the back repeatedly. But he made a speech in 2014 where he said, you can't have moral equivalence between these two people. This was right after 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped and killed by Hamas, and somebody struck back by killing a Palestinian teenager. And he said, this is not the same thing. Listen to Chuck when he was actually talking sense. He wasn't doing anything about it, but he was talking sense.
How can we compare the two sides? How can people say, oh, the Israelis, oh, the Palestinians, it's one big fight, they're all the same? It is not. Again, regretfully, there are fanatics on both sides. And I abhor the Israeli fanatics. They make things bad for the vast majority of Israelis who want to live in peace in a two-state solution. But the vast majority of Israelis condemn the Jewish fanatics. The vast majority of Palestinians seem to praise the Palestinian terrorists. And Hamas, one of the two main governing organizations in Gaza and the West Bank, loudly praises the kidnapping and killing of the 3 Israeli boys.
Right. It's about values. It's about what Israel stands for. Israel stands for freedom. One of the most successful videos I ever did when I first started doing videos was called The One-State Solution, where the entire Middle East is given to Israel. So never mind this two-state solution. And of course, I was joking about that, but I wasn't joking about the fact that the values of Israel that actually supports freedom of religion, supports freedom for women, supports equality, democratic governance, rule of law, all those things that Israel supports that the Palestinians do not support and the Iranians do not support. By the way, there are plenty of countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan that are saying like, yeah, we don't really care about this. Israel is actually better for us than Iran. They're actually siding with Israel now because Iran is becoming such a beast because Obama was pulling out and letting Iran get bigger and bigger and bigger. Those underlying principles are false. Israel is not just our friend because they're our friend. They're our friend because they are us. They are the West. They are freedom. They're rule of law. They're the things that we support in this world. And we don't support the Palestinians in the same way because they are not representing those values. The last thing we need is another crummy country of oppression. When Saudi Arabia moves a little bit toward being more like Israel, more like the West, when these countries do that, they become better countries for their people too. So we're supporting values over there. It is not that all these people are the same, and it's not just the body count either, because the body count, it really does matter who is responsible for it. I want to end with just one thing, I did it yesterday. They released an interview I did on a podcast called Bad Christian Podcast. And on this interview, I was talking about relations with blacks, and they're young guys, and they're saying, well, don't we have white privilege, and shouldn't we balance white privilege? And I said, you know what? You can't change the past. The past is the past. You can only stop doing what you were doing. That's all you can do. You can only start treating people equally. What do I do with an equal person? I compete with him. I try to make him if he wants the job I want, he's got to be better than me. That's it. That way he has to be excellent. And somebody put on Twitter, and I'm not attacking this guy personally. I know he's a man of goodwill. He just wants things to be good. But he says, this was cruel. It is cruel to expect a black man to compete with you. It's like asking a twig to compete with a tank. So I'm cruel because I'm treating a black guy as my equal, which I believe. I'm not just treating him that way. I actually believe he is my equal. But he is kind, like the guy in 300. I am kind. He is kind because he is pitying this guy and infantilizing this guy and belittling this guy in the interest of his feeling that he is serving equality. You want to serve equality, you treat people like equals. And if I treat you like an equal, it means I'm going to make you beat me for everything that I want. If you want to take something from me, you got to be better than me. And ultimately, of course, you'll never beat me. Let's face it. But ultimately, that is going to raise you to excellence. And after I'm dead, you can start having the things that you want. These underlying principles make us foolish, and we don't look around and say, oh, look, they're failing. They're failing. There is no Israel-Palestinian peace process. There hasn't been for 70 years. You can't have a peace process with people who want to destroy you. There's no good for black people in treating them like children, in treating them like second-rate citizens. That is not a good thing. That is not helpful. To say, oh, you need reparations before you can do anything. No, you don't. Get an education. Make sure you marry the women who have your children. Do those things, and you will be everything that you are going to be. And that, when you start to treat people like that, you break the habit of failure because you're getting rid of the underlying values that are leading you astray.